So nice to see you all here. I love to fill this room up, and it's always very gratifying to look out and see that other people care about all these things that we care so much about. It's great. I'm Melanie Hoppert, the coordinator for the forums for Project Green, and I'm here to tell you just a couple things before we introduce our speaker, and to welcome you, of course. We have two more forums after this spring. We'll have this one. This forum is our February forum on water and stone in the garden. In March, on March 6th, Deb Walzer will come and do a repeat performance from Cedar Rapids. She's a master gardener, and she's in tune with the newest perennials that are going to be coming out on the market, as well as some of the old favorites. And so she's going to talk about perennials on March 6th. She's also going to discuss methods and timing for cutting back perennials. And you know how that is. Those of us that get out in the garden, if you can cut back certain plants at just the right time during the year, it makes all the difference in how they perform for you. So that's really going to be a good program. Sunday, April 10th, Gary Wittenbaugh, lifetime master gardener from Owine, Iowa, and an expert in conifers, is going to speak to us, but instead of doing a program on the conifers themselves, he's going to talk about conifer companions. And I have heard this program last year in Ottumwa, and it is really very useful. He's got wonderful slides or PowerPoint. He really knows what he's talking about. He's a wonderful gardener, and I think you'll find that a very, very useful and entertaining program. Project Green will have our garden fair on May 7th, and most of you know probably that's our big fundraiser for the year, and the funds from that garden fair help us to buy plantings and materials for plantings in Iowa City that our community can enjoy and do the work that Project Green loves to do in doing our green grants for schools and our many programs that Project Green has for Iowa City. So that is on May 7th from 9 until 11:30 at the Carver Hawkeye Arena. On June 26th, the Project Green Garden Tour will take place, and I think we have 4 gardens. We have the committee is very excited about the gardens that they have for us this year, and that will be from 10 until 3 o'clock on June 26th. If you aren't writing these things down and later you think, oh my gosh, I can't remember the date or the time, you can always check our website. Our projectgreen.org has all the information you need on Project Green projects. For those of you who haven't been here before, if the papers and pencils on your seats are so that you can write down little questions or big questions, questions you might have during Jamie's presentation today so that you can ask him what's on your mind. We're fortunate today to have Jamie Beyer as our speaker. Jamie comes to us from the Ames, Boone area. Water gardening has been a passion of his for over 45 years. His broad background of fisheries, dynamics of water, wildlife ecology, and horticulture gives him impressive credentials. He's a lifetime master gardener, has a master's degree in fish and wildlife management. He has designed and installed over 700 water gardens and features since the late 1900s. Please welcome Jamie Beyer.
That's perfect. I need to permanently change it to that.
Wow, he's really experienced.
Thank you, Melanie. That was perfect. I couldn't have had a better introduction. That is, I really enjoy that humor there. Was humor, right, Melanie? We're going to have a really good time today. I truly enjoy using water and rock in a garden. And I'm going to start off this afternoon with using rock in the garden. And that is the backbone of the garden. And can everybody hear me all right? Okay. Where's our audiovisual gal? We'll try to get it turned up here.
Keep talking. I'll fix it.
Okay, thank you. I'll speak up as much as I can, and I do have an old voice, so Anyway, adding stone to a garden gives it a sense of permanence. And a lot of us might not think stone is that important to a garden, but it's amazing what a grouping of 3 or 5 rocks will do to any plant grouping. And you'll see as we get into this presentation how important it is to add stone. The Japanese, of course, have added, their backbone of their gardens are always got a lot of stone in it. Actually, a lot of huge amount of stone in Japanese garden. I don't necessarily recommend that much stone, but as you see as I get into this talk, you'll see where it's important to add stone. So, now one thing that Melanie did not mention is that I like questions, I like comments. I learn a lot in these presentations too. I do a lot of them. So I have learned a few things over the years from you guys. So as I get into this, I love comments and questions. So by all means, interject those questions. I'll repeat the questions. This is a large group, so I'll repeat the question so everybody can hear it, and then we'll go from there. Now, this presentation takes about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll take a break. And then we'll do my water feature presentation, which is a little longer, an hour and a half, thereabouts. So we'll use all afternoon until 5 o'clock. So we'll use all that time, but as you'll see, we're going to have a good time doing this. So who among us hasn't been out looking at river rocks or whatever and hasn't put a rock into their pocket? You bend down and I'm going to take that home. Then you take it home, put it on your shelf, kitchen shelf or whatever. Then after a while you get a collection of them, and some of them are really, at least my own little collection, is very valuable to me. When my wife moves one, I see it moved, it's got to be back, so I've done that ever since a kid, and I'm sure a lot of you have too. And so it's interesting, but when you take a grouping of stone. Now these are 3 Mexican beach pebbles. Okay, 3 black, smooth rocks. I'm going to pass these around, but as you see these stones, as you feel them, the allure of the stone itself, a lot of it is the smoothness of the stone. These particular stones, the smoothness. And a lot of people have handled these stones over the years. It's the same 3 stones I pass around over the years. So there's a lot of hand oil on the stones, and it gives the stones a sheen that's kind of nice. Now you can, in your own little stones, if you have smooth stones, you can actually take mineral oil and add to the stone. It actually improves the beauty of the stone. But one thing that I want you to look at with these 3 stones is imagine all 3 stones being the same size versus the 3 stones different sizes. What is more interesting, 3 stones of the same size or 3 stones of different size? Different. Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted you to say. It's this 3 stones of different sizes. And as I pass these around, it's probably going to take quite a while for these 3 stones to make it all the way around. But look at the stones from that standpoint. How much better they look because of their different sizes. Think about that in stone placement in your own garden. Would you place all 3 stones the same size in your garden? Probably not. So I'm going to pass these around and fondle them, do what you need to with them to get a good feeling for them, okay? I'm going to take care of a few basic things we need to understand about stones before I get into placement of stones and balance of stones. But I've grouped stones in 5 different categories. Now, most rock books have stone in 3 categories. I've got 5, okay? The first one is sedimentary stone. Sedimentary stone is stone that's been laid down by sediment layers. Sand is one sediment layer. Limestone is another sediment type stone. So we got sandstone, limestone types of stones. That's sedimentary type stone. Most sedimentary stone is not long-lasting stone compared to more granite types, okay? It can weather fairly fast. It's still a long-lasting object in your garden. And when I say long-lasting, 100 years. A lot of sedimentary stone will last 100 years. However, the harder groups of stone last hundreds of years. So it depends on how much water hits the stone or how much wind hits the stone, how much foot traffic is on the stone, how permanent it is. I want to mention one thing that's very important to me about rock, and I think you'll agree with this. The reason that I like rock so much is that it never dies, it never blows away, it never rots. You know, you think about that in your own garden. Okay, you buy a picnic table, it's going to end up either rotting, rusting, or something eventually, unless it's stainless steel, and that's more permanent. But still, somebody could walk off with it, whereas a big rock, I mean, even people can't carry these big rocks away. So I don't know how many plants I've lost, died. Rock doesn't do that. I love it. Once I grab a rock, and that's if it's an igneous rock, a hard rock, it's there for my lifetime and many lifetimes after. So that is one of the things that I like about stone a lot. So sedimentary stone is not quite as permanent as some of these other types. Another type of stone, metamorphic stone, that's stone that's been compressed by pressure or heat. And slate is a good example of that. That's a metamorphic rock. It was a sedimentary rock, but it was compressed and became a metamorphic rock. The last of the three groupings that most rock books talk about is igneous rock. That's rock from volcanoes or rock that's been spewed out by heat. And that's most of our granites are igneous rock. Okay? And that's the rock that I'm going to talk about mostly this afternoon, the igneous rock, the granite types. Now I said 5 categories, didn't I? That's 3. Now another type of stone that Gary Whittenbaugh talks about a lot, and Gary's going to be here in a couple months, right? Gary is just a wonderful guy, and he makes a stone called hypertufa. Okay? He does a very good trough presentation on hypertufa. Hypertufa that's not Gary's invention, but he's really taken it and helped a lot of people use hypertufa in the garden. And anybody know what hypertufa is? Yes?
It's cement, lightweight. It's creative.
Very good. Yep. You mix cement with perlite and peat moss. And there's various formulas of that. But what's nice about hypertufa, it's half the weight of regular stone. So if you make a trough out of hypertufa, it's versus a trough out of limestone or out of igneous rock, if you could make a trough out of igneous rock, granite, it's a lot lighter. So these troughs are heavy enough as it is, and if you use hypertufa, it's that much lighter. So it's a combination of Portland cement, perlite, and peat moss. Now there's various recipes, but the recipe Gary Whittenbaugh likes to use, and I'll repeat this if you want me to, and it's 1 part Portland cement, 1.5 parts perlite, and 1.5 parts peat moss. It's that simple. And you mix it up with water and you put it in a form, and it could be a tub that you have that you want that shape of trough, but that's a whole different presentations in itself. And Gary Whittenbaugh does a very good job of that. You're going to have to invite him back in years to come to do a trough garden presentation. He does a very good job of that. So, hypertufa, the 4th kind of stone, okay? Now the rock books don't have that, okay? There's one other type of stone, and it's called leverite. Leave it right there. It's too big. You leave it right there. Okay? It's called leverite stone. And I end up encountering a lot of leverites. Oh, I want that rock bad. And I'll do everything in my power to try to get a big rock home. And most of the time, you know, my eyes, my ambitions are a lot bigger than what I can actually do. And I've got a back to prove it. But I've learned to recognize leverites. And you'll see some of these leverites in my pictures. And And some of those require heavy equipment, of course. So we'll talk about leverite a little bit more. It's and if you have a garden that has a lot of naturally occurring leverite, perfect. You can add stone around those leverite. You leave it right there, okay? So what kind of uses do we have for stone in a garden? Of course, we're familiar with paths, using flagstone and paths. A lot of great flagstone out there. We have, in Iowa, we have a lot of limestone, the Iowa buff, coming from this neck of the woods. The Stone City, north of here, just not too far away. Great. Actually, that Stone City limestone is some of the best in the world. It's very, very good limestone. Makes great flagstone pathways, retaining walls. It's used all over Iowa and all over the U.S., really. Stone City really does a very good job marketing that their limestone, but you can make flagstone pathways out of that, and flagstone can be made out of igneous rock too. It doesn't crack as flat as sedimentary stone, so flagstone usually is sedimentary type stone because it cracks flat, and that makes a nice path, of course. So pathways, retaining walls, different kind of retaining walls we can make out of stone. And I'm going to show you some pictures later on about some retaining walls that I make out of igneous rock, granite. And you can make retaining walls out of limestone too, of sedimentary rock, but I'm going to be talking more about the igneous rock and retaining walls. Planting pockets between the stones, we're going to be talking about that. I'm going to repeat that. Planting pockets between the stones. To me, having two rocks to put a plant in between is very exciting to me. Very exciting. You can create a large pocket, small pocket. You can create a high pocket that the plant will cascade down over the stone with. So creating planting pockets between stones is really a very interesting gardening technique. And I'm going to talk about that too. So, of course, when we talk about rock, you have to talk about plants also. Stone by itself without plants is really quite bold, and it's almost too much for the eye. You need to soften that rock with plants. I'm going to be talking about that some more. And then there's rock and water, obviously my passion. So when you add water to stone, it really brings out the beauty in stone, and the reflection of the stone off the water softens that rock also. But when you add rock, water, and plants, it's wonderful. It's the best kind of garden out there. You know, I'm passionate about it, but you'll see as I go on here. And of course, structures made out of stone. I'm not going to talk so much about buildings out of rock or big stone walls. I'm going to talk about that. But if you're interested in that, there's a lot of good references in this library. I was noticing some very good books over here that they've got laid out that the library handles. So, okay, now, I want to talk about different regional characteristics of stone just briefly. Each area of the U.S. has its own kind of rock. Okay? Now, we're fortunate in Iowa that the last glacier, 13,000 years ago, 11,000, 13,000 years ago, that lobe brought down a lot of stone into Iowa. And most of that stone came from the Minnesota Shield, you know, the Canada, Minnesota. That rock was actually carried down by the glacier. And it's left in moraines. In kind of a moraine is an area of the glacier that advanced and then receded, and the stone was left in this moraine. Okay? I am so serious about collecting stone that I'll go out flying looking for stone, and I've got my map, and the Iowa Geological Survey has done a very good job marking out where these moraines are at. But my wife gave me as a Christmas gift flying time. We went flying looking for these moraines. And you can see them in the ground. You can see them. You can see, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I'm so passionate about it that I've got maps where I've got these moraines mapped out. Okay? So, now, this is Iowa stone. Then you go to Wisconsin, it's a whole different kind of stone. It's black, generally very dark stone. Anybody from Wisconsin here or from that area? You're familiar with the Wisconsin, how dark the stone is up there? You get in Stevens Point area, it's very, very dark stone. They don't have any light-colored stuff. It's all pretty dark. Not necessarily black, but it's dark brown, and you know what I'm talking about. Okay, that's Wisconsin stone. Get out to Colorado, and its stone is red. It's kind of a red sandstone. You get up into the Rocky Mountains, and a lot of that rock is a kind of a reddish tinge. The reason I bring this up is that if you mix different region stone together, it looks odd. Doesn't mean you can't do it. It just looks odd. If I had 4 or 5 Colorado stone in with some Wisconsin stone, it would look really odd. I mean, here's this red, really nice red, lichen-covered stone from Colorado versus Wisconsin stone that's almost black. In certain situations, it might look all right, but generally speaking, it would look odd. It would look like nature did not do it. And that's probably the most important thing that I can convey to you this afternoon is I want to convey to you the sense of nature put it there. Okay? Now, when we talk about rock, we talk about an informal type of gardening. Generally speaking, when we use stone in a garden, it's an informal type of garden. The difference between formal and informal is formal is very predictive lines. You've got either straight lines or definite angles to the garden. It's predictable. Whereas an informal garden is very unpredictable lines. Very curvilinear most of the time. So stone is an informal type of gardening. And if you line up the stones evenly spaced, boom, boom, all the same size, boom. Now remember, I talked about different sizes of stone. But if you use all the same size, evenly spaced, how odd is that? A lot of people do that, though. I mean, I see it I'd say majority of landscaping projects, I see that done. The stone is placed evenly apart, same size stone. It's just nature wouldn't do it that way. The stones are going to be irregularly placed by nature. They're going to be partially buried. We're going to be talking more about that, but how nature would do it. Okay? Think about that as I go along in this talk, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So, okay, why don't we have the slides. Is everybody seeing those stones? How far are they, the 3 rocks? Everybody, where are they at? They all the way back there already? Oh, good. Okay, super. So we're gonna start. You want to turn on the slide projector for me? Now, I like some light. I don't like it too dark. Who's controlling the lights? Okay. Now remember, I like questions and I like comments. So this is perfect. Can you turn down the ones in front? The ones in front? Now, I do like comments a lot. Now, I haven't had any yet. Okay? So, as we get going here, oh, it's right there.
Theoretically, anyway.
Theoretically.
Let's see this.
Oh, here we go.
And then we'll turn this back on. Theoretically.
How about a little bit forward, a little bit more forward, and a little bit more forward.
You get too much.
There, that's perfect. Okay, how's that? You don't want that one? Okay.
You can play with them.
You bet. I think. Better? Okay. Okay. Now, you're not going to be able to read the handouts at this light level, so I'm going to be covering everything I'm going to be talking about is covered in the handouts. Okay, so really your notes, it's really, I really have it on the handouts. That's the importance of the handouts. So, okay, this is my introductory slide to stone. And this is a Garden in Ames. That's a lever, right? Okay.
I hate to do this, but people at home can't see it with this much light, so I got to turn the lights down.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Your projector's not.
Okay, that's fine. We're going to have to turn the lights down a little bit lower. So, I don't know if she's going to do it or I'm going to do it. Oops. Okay, she's doing it. Okay. the slides look a little bit better, and it's not black. So anyway, I am, by the way, going to PowerPoint, okay, but I'm a rock age sort of guy. It takes me forever to switch over. And Kodachrome, I can no longer develop my Kodachrome slides, so I have to go digital now. So it's hard for me. But getting back to these rocks. This is a leverite, and these stones, this is more of a movable type stone, and all these stones are too. But one thing I want to point out is the beauty of this grouping of stones. Okay? Of course, this stone by itself is an erratic stone, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about erratics here in a little bit, but this is a good introductory slide just because of the beauty of this stone. It's an erratic. And notice the shape of these stones as well as the how they're positioned. We're going to be talking more about that just a little bit. Okay. Okay, where do you find rock? Okay. Now, like I say, here in Iowa, I told you about the moraines that occur. And actually in the Iowa City area, you go further north, there's a great bunch of stone north of here. Lots of fields of stone. If you see a rolling pasture, or a flat pasture exceptionally, generally speaking, there'll be a lot of rock in that field. If it's a pasture, it's so hard for the farmer to till that up because of the rock. Generally speaking, there'll be rock in that pasture, generally speaking. If I see a pasture in Iowa that's rolling or even flat ground, generally speaking, there'll be rock in there. Now, this is a flat field up by Waterloo area. Lots of naturally occurring stones, and a friend's helping me dig those stones out. Now, most people, that'd be a leverite, but I have some equipment to move it, and I'm getting that bugger. It's a beautiful, beautiful stone. And you can't really see the beauty of it halfway in the ground like that, but once I got it up, it's just a wonderful stone. That whole field is just dotted with stones, the whole field. Wonderful. So where else do you find stone? Of course, there's these pastures, but whenever I find a rock pile along the road, generally speaking, that's an area where there's going to be more rock piles. If you find one rock pile, circle the section, go around many times, go flying, looking for rock in the middle of the field fence lines. Now, in the spring and fall of the year when the crops are out, it's easier to see those rock piles in the middle of fields. But remember, when you find a rock pile in the ditch, then there's generally speaking more rock piles nearby. I can't emphasize that enough. You find one rock pile, don't give up on that area. Keep circling the section. And you concentric circle out, and you'll find a lot more rock piles generally. Now, the stone that's in the ditch, if it's in the ditch, the farmer threw it away. Now, if it's controlling erosion, I won't take the stone. But if it's just piled in the ditch and it's on this side of the fence line, I help myself. And I've never been questioned about it. Matter of fact, one time it was a hot July day. It was just sweltering out. And I was wearing a pair of shorts, had my steel-toed boots on, and I'm crawling over this rock pile. And the farmer had been out cultivating. They used to cultivate. You remember? Used to cultivate. That's right. He goes driving by in his tractor, and he looks at me, and he just shakes his head. This guy's got to be cooked. But I was on a very nice rock pile in the ditch. And it's amazing if the rock pile is over the fence line, get permission, easy to get permission. Stone is becoming more popular, so some farmers are selling stone, so it's getting harder to get free stone. But if you ask nicely and smile, a lot of times it'll work, getting that stone. But get permission, okay? Now, a lot of times, old stone foundations in barns and houses, you can get a lot of stone from those places. Great source of stone, great source. And of course, stone yards. Is there any stone yards in the Iowa City area? The places that sell stone, you familiar with any? Quarries would be one place, but what I'm referring to is more, they've collected igneous rock, really nice specimen rock.
King's material.
King's material, they do it, very good. And a lot of that stone is sold to water gardeners too. A typical water garden that's say 10 foot by 10 foot, not very big, will use at least 15 tons of stone. Of course, it doesn't take a lot to make a ton of stone, does it? But about 15 tons. And a lot of that stone is used in the stream and so forth. So if it's 15 cents a pound, 25 cents a pound, you're getting a good deal. Okay, depends on whether it's delivered or not. If it's it makes a difference. Delivery is most of the cost of stone, by the way. Get it for them to get it and then delivered to you. So I pride myself in getting my own rock, obviously. So okay, other places to get rock. Those are the best places. I'm just trying to think of any other construction sites. Good, that is good. Where they've been digging and they hit rock and yep, that's good. Riverbeds, good place.
Cliffs,
What's that?
cliffs,
Cliffs, another good place. Yep. Good sources of stone. So actually, your imagination, just think about where stone could occur and go looking. Most of the time, you got to get permission. Even on our wildlife management areas, you still need. Generally speaking, they won't let you take the stone off of wildlife management area. Our DNR public lands. So those are pretty much off limits. But private ground, get permission, and they'll hopefully let you have permission. Okay. This stone, the reason I'm showing you this picture is this stone is an erratic stone, and I've got a good example of an erratic up here. I'll show you after the lights come back on. But what I like to show about this erratic is that it naturally cups water. And that's, this is a good place for chipmunks and birds to come get a drink of water. And the guy that owns this garden, he fills that little pocket of water up every day. It's just a natural little pocket of water in his garden. And there are carving techniques I'll just briefly touch on at the end of my talk that we can actually carve and make pockets out of stone. Make pockets in stone, let me put it that way. Okay? Okay. Now, I'm going to be talking about placement of stone more, and we're going to be going over those handouts. Now, you can't see your handouts very well, but this is what's on your handouts, okay? Now, a rock by itself is a very inhumane way to treat a rock. Now, I actually call it in-earth-ane. Instead of inhumane, it's in-earth-ane. Okay, enough of that. Okay, but it's a rock in nature. For it to be by itself is very, very unusual. So a rock all by itself, it does have some company by this sign, but a rock by itself is very unusual. So to improve this rock, you should add a couple more rocks with it. It would really improve the look of that one stone. I like the idea of adding a stone, of course, but add a couple more with it. Okay? Now, how often do you see this? It's got more rock, but it is a fence. But no, actually, you can make that same fence by varying the difference, the difference in the spacing. This is a little closer, but actually have this rock over here and then put a rock over here. Put another rock here. And a different size rock would be good. They're all the same size. Vary the size also. And then another technique that's very important when you're placing these stones is to bury it partially. Now you think, oh my God, I got this big stone home and I'm going to bury half of it? A perfectly round stone, and this is almost perfectly round, you want to bury it where the curvature of the stone starts coming back around. In nature, that's where that stone would sit. Now, a stone that's got one flat side, you basically set it on top of the ground, the flat side down. It looks like the stone's buried then, partially. So in my rock picking, most of the stones I pick usually has a flat side to it. I'll pick some rounder rocks. I'll pick some if it's got good grain, good shape, other than just perfectly round. So to improve this, add different forms of rock, different shapes of rock, and vary the spacing and partially bury those rock. Okay? But this is an improvement over that first slide with one rock, right? It's got more rock. Okay, here's two rocks, kinda. And they've put some plants around it. An improvement. These plants are plastic. But it's an improvement. We got a long ways to go yet, don't we? Okay. Okay, here's some stone. This is a stone. I've got a flagstone. We're using Iowa buff along here. And then this stone is a piece of granite, and I've got another stone with it that's a little different shapes. Here's more of a upright stone, and then I got plants growing around it. That's a naturalizing tulip. It's a tulip called Tarda. A very nice tulip, by the way. It naturalizes, actually increases in its clumping. Very nice tulip. These daffodils here also are naturalizing. But an improvement, okay? And of course, we've added plants, got more rocks, and now when you add water, the plants cascading down over that water, it just really softens the edges of those stones. Okay. This is a 3-rock grouping, more of an upright rock, round rocks, and plants in with it. Helps the rock. It's still, this needs some improvement. This is a bed that I created 20 years ago and without realizing what I was doing. But notice I do have different shapes rocks, but all the hostas are pretty much the same shape. The plants that I have with them are all kind of round plants. I need some more upright plants and low plants in that grouping. It actually improves the rocks. I do a whole nother presentation on using, I call it my E form of landscaping. Okay, you're going, E, what's E mean? Well, this rock is a roundy, round E. This is a pointy. And there's a rock over here that you can't see, it's a flatty. And you want all 3 forms in any grouping. You want a roundy, a pointy, and a flatty. Now you can't see the flatty here. It should have been, I should have had a flatty out in front here. But the important thing is the plant material also has to be roundy, pointy flatties. Any hostaholic would love this. They love all hostas in a grouping. I'm there. I've done her. I've been there. But now I have since learned in my own landscaping to create put some pointy plants in here, maybe some bleeding heart, some other shade-loving plants in amongst it. A stilby would be a good one. Coleus is very popular now, various forms of coleus. But put some more pointy plants in there too. Notice I said pointy plants. Grasses are very popular now. Of course, grasses need more sun than what this has, but include some pointies, and then also some flatties. What would be good examples of flatties in the shade? Maybe here's some ajuga. Ajuga would work. Lamium. Yep. Very good choices. But remember, roundy, pointy, flatties in the rock as well as the plants. That's my E-talk in a nutshell. Okay. Notice the stone here. This is that same picture, looking at it from the other side. Roundy, pointy, flatties. Notice the plant material, pointy, flatties, roundies. By having the different shapes gives this a lot more interest. It's like you looking at those 3 rocks that were passed around. Having all 3 rocks the same size really doesn't create much interest. However, by having different size rocks, different size plants, and different forms of plants and rocks really improves the look of it. Pointy, flatties, roundies in plants. This is a type of garden, Japanese gardening called Zen gardening. It's very high maintenance sort of Japanese gardening. But in their islands, these are islands in the ocean, That's what it's trying to convey, as an ocean with waves, okay? And then this is like Japan is a series of islands, and they're actually trying to recreate, or that the message they're trying to create is islands in the ocean. What's interesting on these islands is they'll have roundy, pointy flatties on every island, in the plants as well as the rocks. Any Zen garden worth its salt is going to have roundy, pointy flatties on those islands. Very high maintenance sort of deal. A leaf on that would screw it up. It's not my kind of gardening. A dog running through that would screw it up. A raccoon running through that. A squirrel digging in that. Okay. So some people like this. Not me, but some people do. And that's fine. That's actually, if you have a small garden, this kind of intensive gardening is fine. This is another type of Zen garden. Notice the roundy, pointy flatties on these islands. Right? This is a Gary Whittenbaugh creation. Remember, we were talking about Gary Whittenbaugh coming here in a couple months or whatever. Gary is very creative, and this is a hypertufa trough. Okay? It looks like stone. It's one of my 5 kinds of stone. It's the 4th one. Relatively light, but the main thing I want to show you about this is even on top of this trough, there's roundy, pointy flatties. Notice the pointy plant, the roundy plants, and more flat plants. Okay? Stone, pointy, roundies, flatties. Same thing on these troughs. If all the stone was pointy, it would look terrible. If all the plants were pointies, it would look terrible. Now, think about your container gardening. Any container garden worth its salt is going to have a pointy, a roundy, and a flatty, and the flatty's usually cascading over the sides of the container, isn't it? So think about that. In your own garden landscape, in a much bigger scale, with rock and plants, roundy, pointy, flatties. Now, what's interesting about the terms, the E terms, is that I was doing this talk, I'm going to say 10 years ago, and Gary Whittenbaugh was in the audience. I was doing my rock talk. And I was talking about round rocks and upright rocks and round, flat rocks. Gary raises his hand and he goes, I call those roundy, pointy flatties. And when he said that, the whole place erupted. So ever since then, using those terms really sinks in. It really sinks in, and this is his creation too. This is his trough. Now, here's a garden that, now notice, all the rocks are pointies. Every rock. How, it's too, quote unquote, exciting. It's too much upright. Too much of that. They needed other forms of rock in that. Now, somebody went to a lot of effort to create that garden. And actually, it's got a lot of great plant material in it, but even a lot of the plant material is pointies. But it's too visually stimulating. And one thing I want to mention before I go into this slide is what that looks like to me is a graveyard. If you go to a cemetery, right, you know exactly what I'm talking about. All the gravestones sticking up. That's what it reminds me of. And so stay away from too much pointy. Got to have some pointy, but okay. Moving rock. Let's talk about moving stone. Now, a lot of us are getting up in years, and I've been doing this since the 1900s. So I have learned. I got to give you grief, Billy. Sorry. I have learned to not use my back and use tools. And tools are a very important part of moving stone. And my philosophy is if I can move the rock, just slightly move it. If it's in the ground and I can move it a little bit, it's mine. If the rock is so big that I can't even move it, generally speaking, it's a leverite. So now these are the tools that I use routinely. obviously a pry bar. Once I go over a stone pile, I'll look at a rock, and generally speaking, there might be another rock on top of it. I get that pry bar underneath there, and I can, generally speaking, pry that rock off with the pry bar without a lot of muscle. I'm just using levers to move those rocks. So pry bar is an important part of collecting stone, and just moving stone in your own garden using a pry bar. And these are inexpensive, relatively. I have since bought a couple other tools that work well. This is a cart. That tip of that cart, it will actually, you lift up the handle, the tip of that cart goes right to the ground. So that I can roll, if I can roll a rock, I can roll a rock onto that cart. And then I can move that rock anywhere in my garden, as long as the rock's not too big. Okay? That rock right there is what I call a two-person rock. Now, I used to say two-man rock. Now I've become more politically sensitive or correct, I guess. You know, a lot of women out there that can actually handle rock a lot better than I can. So this is a two-person rock. And then there's, when you start getting bigger than a two-person rock, it gets into the category of a leverite. But if you've got the right tools, then you can, if you can roll it, move it. This is another tool that I have since added to my collection of rock moving equipment. And I'll use these tools in my profession a little bit too. I do some landscaping, and I do quite a bit of water garden stuff, water garden installs, and I use these tools for that. But this cart is a very handy two-wheel cart. It's tubular, it's not tubular steel, but rod steel. It makes up this cart. You know what that cart is used for? And being from Iowa, somebody here may know that. It's a hog carcass moving rock, or hog carcass moving cart. Okay? Notice the winch on it. But if a big 1,000-pound hog dies in a building, how do you get it out? And this is what they use. And they crank the carcass up with ching, 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 ching. I saw that advertised in one of the farm magazines. Oh, that's my cart. That is my cart. And I have put much larger rock on this thing. And these are pneumatic tires. I've actually almost flattened the tires. But very, very efficient cart. If you're really serious about moving rock, Farm Tech Supply has those carts. Okay, very good moving. Now, of course, you use planks. You can use planks. You can use sheets of steel to actually move rock. I've actually used large, thick sheets of plastic and actually slid rock on plastic. You can use rollers. Familiar with how the Egyptians built the pyramids? They used a series of rollers to move rocks. You can use all those sorts of techniques. These are so much easier, though. So, okay, and here I am. This is the rock. Most people would call it a leverite. Right. But man, oh man, I had to have it. So I'm working on it. And I'm digging it out, and I put it on my trailer. And I've actually got a winch that attaches to the front of this trailer, and I winched it right onto the trailer. That rock is a 3,000-pound rock, 1.5 tons. But this trailer is built for that, and actually I drove around town for about an hour one day showing off my rock. Of course, I had to go to the auto wash place and wash all the mud off, But I was very proud of that stone. One of the things I like about it, notice the smoothness of it. It's a great erratic rock. It's a stone that anybody would want, and most people would call it a leverite. And here it is in the landscape. This is stone that was associated in that same field. These stones were in that same field, so I brought those stones with it, and it really makes a nice grouping. Freshly planted, really looks nice. Now, I'm going to touch really brief on carving rock and drilling rock. Using stone and water features is very popular nowadays. Using drilled stone and actually what they call bubbling stone features. And in my water talk, I'm going to actually be showing you a lot of pictures of different stone water features. And this is drilling a stone with a roto hammer. Most mortuary headstone people, mortuary stone makers, they use these tools, and if you have a rock that you want drilled, just take it to those places, and they'll have these large drills. It's a small jackhammer, a rotating jackhammer. They call it a roto hammer. It drills into that stone very nicely. And it's amazing that bit will go through some very, very hard rock. Those bits, a large 1-inch bit can be $200, just for the bit. So for them to, if you're drilling a 2-inch hole in a stone, which is a large hole, this is a half-inch hole, by the way, but they'll charge you probably $50 to $80 to drill a rock. One thing I might mention is if it's a rock you can't part with, don't have it drilled, because it's possibility it could break on you. So if it's your favorite rock, don't necessarily take it to have it drilled. This is a stone that I carved, and normally I carry that stone with me, but it's underneath about 7 foot of snow right now, and so I left it at home. But I carved this stone out. I carved the cavity. I don't know if you can see it very well, and then I drilled a hole in it, and it makes a very nice water rock. I've had offers of $75 for that small rock, just for the rock. It's a very nice stone. Actually, I think it's under 7 foot of snow. Somebody might have stole that rock. Yeah.
What's the purpose of drilling the hole when you got
Okay.
this nice pocket?
Okay, the question is what's the purpose of drilling the hole in the rock? And that is to bubble water up out of that.
Okay.
And I'll show you some pictures in my water talk that's done very nicely, okay? You actually bubble water out of that, and then it cascades down out of the rock. Good question, okay? That's about 10 inches wide, not very big, not very big. And that's just a little half-inch hole. And I wish I had the rock with me, and then we could look at it afterward. But I carved that rock out with pneumatic tools. And these mortuary places can do that for you. Okay. A lot of stone nowadays. A lot of people are having the rock etched with words. This rock has the word "listen" in it. A friend gave me that rock, but there's a waterfall over here. And when you look at that rock, you just take time to listen to that waterfall. I really like doing this, labeling plants with carved rock, if you can afford it. It's kind of a nice way to label your plant material with etched stone. And of course, using stone like this is a different way of using stone, of course. This is feather stone, and it's been carved and drilled and used in a water feature, but it cascades down very nicely. Feather stone. Everybody familiar with feather stone? It's a real lightweight igneous rock. That rock right there would be very easy to lift for one person. So it's very lightweight stuff. Expensive. Earl May sells it. Do you guys have Earl Mays over here? Yeah, they sell it at times. Called feather stone. Very easily carved. You can actually carve it with an old chisel, and you can just carve it out. Very easily carved. Pumice stone. Some people call it pumice stone. That's another name for it. And of course, regular waterfalls. This is mostly limestone. Okay. Okay. This is, I just want to show you real briefly. Notice this rock edge. Very tacky is a good way of saying it. All the stones are about the same size. They're all on top of the ground. They're probably pretty proud of it, but they could have improved that. What's that? That is true. Yeah, grass would grow in between that. It would be, unless you put some landscape fabric down or something to keep the grass from growing in amongst the rocks, it'd be very hard to maintain also. But this could be improved so much by including larger stones in with it and burying part of those stones. It'd improve it a lot. Flagstone pathways. To me, when you walk along this path, you have to purposely you have to look at the path. I prefer more of an offset type path. It looks more natural, like nature would have done it. If it's an offset path, these stones are sitting on top of the ground. The stones need to be buried in the ground a little bit to improve the path. This is the type of path that really, you saw a picture of these rocks earlier. You saw a picture of that with the tulips growing around it, remember? That was that rock. This is the path, recently laid, and the stones are pretty much fitted. When you walk on that path, it's almost like walking on a cement path. You don't have to look where your feet are to walk on that path. It is more expensive to install a path like that, but to me, aesthetically, it's a lot more pleasing. Big stone walls. These are heavy machinery needs to create stone walls like this, and I'm going to leave it at that. Most people here, unless you pay for this kind of work to be done. One thing I want to mention here is notice the scarring on the rock. You can't help that. You can't be helped when placing stone, how that stone becomes scarred. But when stone is scarred, it actually looks new. The stone looks like it was just put there, obviously. So if you can reduce the scarring by, a lot of people will take sandpaper and sand that scarring off, and then they actually take some cement dye and dye those scratches out. It really improves the look of it a lot. But that scarring, to me, aesthetically, hurts that wall quite a bit. Now, this is the type of stone wall that I want to talk about briefly with you here today. This is a stone wall that uses all different sizes of stones, and there's a few planting pockets in it, but this is an aesthetically pleasing stone wall to me. And I think you would agree that it does look good to you. Okay? Mainly because they've got an upright rock in here, they've got round rocks, and they have more flat rocks in there. See the upright? They're mimicking stone placement that is good principles of stone placement in that rock wall. Here's a rock wall that is an inspiration, has been an inspiration to me for the last 35 years. It's a garden in Ames, and I remember driving by this and seeing this stone wall. I saw that, and it just makes your eyes pop when you see that rock wall. There is some maintenance in hand weeding that. But once the plants are mature, there's very little weeds that can grow in amongst those plants once the plants are mature. Initially, there's a lot of hand weeding. I'm going to show you some close-ups of this, but what makes this wall really pretty is the different sizes of stone in that rock wall. The uprights and the rounds and the flatties. Look at the planting pockets in that. Lots of fun areas to put all different kinds of plants. They put annuals along the edge. You know, the same couple must own this place because it looks the same pretty much year after year. They always put annuals, little marigolds along the edge. But very inviting stone wall. What makes that inviting, remember, is the different sizes of stone and different shapes of stone in that. There's roundy, pointy, flatties in that rock wall. To create the planting pockets, you purposely place the stone offset a little bit to create a nice planting pocket. And these are carved stone water features. I'm going to be talking quite a bit about that after we take our break. Carving that, or using stone in water. And this is a water feature that uses stone as a base. There's a container underneath there, and this is a water feature. Cannas, water hyacinths, and there's coleus growing in the ground right here, but this is a type of water feature using stone as a basis for it. Okay, now, remember that stone that I've been showing a lot of that I was digging out of the field? Well, a friend of mine that actually invited me up there, he laid claim to this baby. It was in the same field. And that stone just pops out at you. Now, that's a good example of an erratic. And what forms an erratic stone? What process do you think would form this erratic?
Water.
Exactly. Water and just erosion in general. It can be wind erosion or water. But this stone is softer than that stone. The lighter stone is harder than the dark stone. So as that darker stone is eroded out, this lighter stone is left behind and becomes more of an erratic. Very, very inviting. This guy, now I want to mention to you, I want to mention to you something, another very important principle here, is that if you have access to a lot of erratic stone, you don't want every stone in your garden erratics. You have to have some plain Jane stone in with your erratics. Otherwise, it takes away from the beauty of the erratic. Now, a person like myself, I call myself kind of a plain Jane sort of person. I make pretty people look good. You understand what I'm saying? This baby is a real pretty stone. But you got to have a round stone, just a plain Jane round stone with it, just to pop that beauty out. Now think about it. Think about a garden that's got all erratics in it, or just beautiful. Every stone's a pretty stone. They're pretty, but they're prettier if they have some plain Janes next to it. Remember how ugly I am and how it makes other people look better. Okay? Okay, now this is a friend of mine, Bill Boone, who's a landscape architect, retired professor from Iowa State University. You know that other university over that way? I think that's the east. You know about Bill? Bill Boone is just a great person. Very creative. And he actually taught me a lot on stone placement 30 years ago. And he is going to be placing stones in this dirt berm. They brought in the dirt to create a dirt berm just to give it some height. And they're getting ready to place stone in this. Here's the crane, big. Most people would call that a leverite. Okay? But they're getting ready to put stone in that. Oh my Lord. Oh, something happened. Let's see if I've got it. Okay. Here's the stone placed. Notice the roundy, more pointies and flatties. This would be considered a pointy. You know, when you have these categories, there's gradations in between the roundy, pointy, flatties, but you have more upright rock and you have more flat rock in the grouping. Notice how the stone is associated with each other. This stone is touching that one. Very important that a few stones touch and that a few stones are off by themselves. Okay? Now, it looks very, very bland without the plants. You add plants, it really adds a lot to it. And there's a lot of evergreens and flatties in amongst the stone. Makes it very inviting. There's another angle, a little bit darker shot, but another angle. This is at Ryman Gardens. They have since torn that out. Yeah, I know. But they put the butterfly garden in and all the butterfly wing in and all that, and that's exactly where that sits. The butterfly wing's right there. So wonderful garden, but it was there about 6-7 years. I was hoping as it matured I'd get more pictures of it, but they tore it out. So okay, now this is a water garden that I created a few years ago, actually like 15 years ago, in the early 1900s actually. This is, right now, it's just I just finished it. We're getting ready to plant it. I put some burlap in there to stabilize the soil. I put some more burlap over here. But this is just water and rock. Just water and rock. You add the plants, and it really is very inviting with the plants. The plants soften that rock. Now, I'm going to back up again. I want you to take a look. Before plants.
Can I ask a question on the burlap?
Of course.
You leave the burlap,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're gonna add the soil, and then add the plants?
The burlap.
Through the burlap?
Good question. Actually, the burlap, you just cut an X in the burlap wherever you're going to put a plant, and the burlap rots away, and there's lots of nice black soil underneath there. Good question. Yep. So, and that really stabilizes the soil. Otherwise, you get a heavy rain, new plant material, and that dirt can wash right into the water garden just, within a couple weeks, if we get heavy rain right then. And we're known for some heavy rains, and snows. But with plants, very inviting, the water plants help a lot. But the stone, notice the stones, all different size stones, upright stones, flat stones, round stones, all different kinds of stones. All that stone is Iowa's field stone. It came from within a 10-mile radius of Ames. Yep, every stone there. That's it for slides. Can I have, you want to turn off that projector for me, please? Okay, now, we're doing about right on time, aren't we? Okay, now, on your handout, there's lots of good information on that, especially on that tan handout. I go over more items in that tan handout that makes a lot of sense to you. So, now, if you have any questions on this, feel free to email me. I'm not sure whether my email is available. Does the public library have a website that they can put my email on there maybe, or how you do that? Okay, yeah. Feel free to email me. Actually, afterward, I'll be glad to provide you my email address, and that would be good. By all means, ask me questions, and I'd be glad to look at a project you're looking at and help you with that. So, thank you.
Now,